At CitizenCon this year, they shared what the future updates for Star Citizen's persistent universe over the next coming year were, now that Squadron 42 is feature complete. But the way they explained it might have some people confused about when and if certain features will make it into the persistent universe. What's the significance of Squadron 42 being feature complete, and how does that change what we can expect from the persistent universe's development? Well, strap in while I explain what was real, when you might be able to expect it, and what was just another sandworm at CitizenCon 2953. Now, there were a lot of things shown during CitizenCon, but to get a real picture of it all, it's important to know that everything we saw, I believe, falls into one of four categories, which are Star Engine, which is the engine that Star Citizen and Squadron 42 are built on, Squadron 42 itself, which is the single-player upcoming game connected to Star Citizen, Star Citizen, which is in reference to things that we're going to see in the persistent universe version of the game, and of course, Sandworm, which is things that they just show, but we have no idea when we're actually going to see it. Now, the thing about Star Engine, these are things that the engine that Star Citizen is built with can technically achieve in some use cases. The opening of the convention showcased a nearly 30-minute tech demo of Star Engine, which stated that these were all things we have in the game now. So you could be forgiven if you thought that these were all features for the persistent universe that were right around the corner, but we certainly don't have animals in the game, we don't have the physical destruction system called Maelstrom, and we certainly don't have the level of dynamic water effects in the game or the Star Cloth simulation. And while Star Citizen is built with Star Engine, that doesn't mean we're going to see everything that was demonstrated from it in the persistent universe, or potentially even in Squadron 42. It just means that the engine is capable of doing it, but that doesn't mean it's viable to put into a live environment like Star Citizen. It just means if another developer chooses to license the engine for their own game, it could potentially pull it off for their own game if they wanted it to. Now, there was a lot of footage shown from the single-player game Squadron 42, but it's important to note that a lot of the Squadron 42 footage that was used wasn't to demonstrate Squadron 42 gameplay, but to show changes in systems that will be happening in the Star Citizen persistent universe. And this makes sense. We've had CIG telling us for years that certain parts of the game flat out weren't going to be fixed or addressed and were on pause until Squadron 42 was finished development. This is because while previously they were developing Star Citizen and Squadron 42 in tandem, it was commonplace that one team would make a design decision on something like, for instance, the hull size of a certain ship. But then once that ship design was completed by a team and made its way to the other team to be incorporated in that project, that team then realized they needed the hallway to be twice the size to allow for a specific gameplay mechanic, which was a requirement that the other team never had to design for, meaning that they had to scrap and redesign things over and over again. That kind of problem had been popping up and stalling development for years, so it was decided that core systems would be developed in Squadron 42 first, and then once finalized, they would then be ported over to the persistent universe. Feature complete in game development means pretty much what it sounds like. For each feature or mechanic you need in your game, they are completed from concept to implementation, and they may not work perfectly, but as far as how they're going to work, that's been completed. The actual gameplay, music, story, level design, and cinematics may still all need to be finished, but the core structure of the actual gameplay is there. And that reason itself is why the announcement of Squadron 42 being feature complete was such huge news. Not just because we're closer to having Squadron 42 released, but for the persistent universe as well, since a large portion of the Squadron 42 team was now free to work on the persistent universe and work on porting those types of features over to the PU piece by piece. You can actually tell rather easily which footage was shown from the Squadron 42 build and what was shown from the Star Citizen persistent universe code base. With Squadron 42 having less restrictions on it being a single-player game, there's certainly more processing power freed up to help make it look a lot prettier and more cinematic, since the game only needs to focus on rendering what's being shown to the player, unlike the Persistent Universe's need to make things be rendered very efficiently and communicated across the server for simultaneous players. So when they cut to the footage clearly shot on the Persistent Universe codebase, things look a lot more stripped down and janky, for lack of a better word. Here's some of the things we saw that advertised changes in the Persistent Universe but were demonstrated in Squadron 42. The character creator updates, the hair technology, the dynamic poopy smear, like ugly dirt and sweat technology, the reworked user interface, mobiGlas, minimap, star map, markers, and pathfinding, the new interaction system with how you pick things up and turn things on, the zero-G movement, the looting user interface, the weapon changes and gun malfunctions, and reworked ship MFD stuff. That was all shown in Squadron 42 on a completely different code base compared to the Persistent Universe. Currently, the only feature slated for a release to be ported into the Star Citizen Persistent Universe is the player hair update, which has been tentatively scheduled for a Q4 release this year with build 3.22. Out of all these features, I'm most worried about the implementation of the minimap, star map, markers, and pathfinding. These have been some of the buggiest and most frustrating parts of Star Citizen for the longest time. And with the scope and speed of what they showed us running on the Squadron 42 codebase, I'd be very impressed if they managed to successfully incorporate that as fluently as what was shown during CitizenCon, without at least a long, buggy test period ahead of us. Now, with Star Citizen, the footage and gameplay that was built exclusively for the Persistent Universe that was shown was on a version of the codebase we have currently on the live environment, but many of the things shown were shown in a very optimized builds on closed internal servers that don't contain many of the issues that come into play when it's in a live online environment. All we can know for sure about these elements is that they likely only exist as tech demos on someone's computer at CIG, but as far as how they've gone into figuring out how to include it successfully into an online environment, we have no idea other than next year. And this footage include the player hangars, the cargo elevators and changes, resource management, distribution centers, and server meshing. Some cargo changes are happening at the moment, since with the recent inclusion of tractor beams and the cargo containers being slated for a Q4 release, how all these systems are going to work in conjunction with each other all need to be considered, which in my opinion go suggest that the cargo elevators and player hangars aren't that far behind and will likely be the first added to the release view for 2024. The server meshing demonstration was impressive, but we need to remember how vastly different achieving it on a closed system in a hallway is to scaling it to work over multiple star systems inside of ships and with thousands of players all moving through and reacting with each other. And how many servers are going to be required to be meshed per ship, station, planet, or system? That's all stuff which is likely going to have a lot of holes and take a long time to get working right. And finally, Sandworms. And this is, for the sake of discussion, footage of gameplay that doesn't exist on any of the previous categories and is only used to demonstrate a pitch for what future gameplay could look like in an ideal situation, and is entirely just a concept at this point. This term is based off of CitizenCon years back, where they showed gameplay against a giant sandworm, which we've never seen or heard from since. But the way they portrayed it made it seem like it was coming to the game very soon. We were lucky to only have one major sandworm this time, which was a bunch of concept looks at how player-built bases would or could look. Although, unlike the Sandworm, these are actually something Star Citizen plans on including in the Persistent Universe. It's important to understand, compared to everything else shown during the convention, these haven't even begun to be being worked on, and rely on several major gameplay systems and technologies to be implemented beforehand, since even if they had the gameplay features fully designed for the player hubs, they still wouldn't have the network infrastructure, enough star systems to house players, the ships to construct them, the server meshing, the planet deformation systems, and whatever distant entity streaming changes required to be able to write and retrieve all this data reliably. Now, for clarity, I'm not saying all these things won't eventually be included in Star Citizen, but the purpose of this video is to help give you a more realistic expectation of what might be standing in the way of us getting some of these features in the persistent universe and when that might happen. And ultimately, we should be excited for the coming years, since without Squadron 42 posing such a roadblock to the team, more manpower being moved to the persistent universe, the fact that we're on the verge of finally breaking out of the Stanton system and server meshing, potentially solving the stability issues, we're that much closer to the game that we've been promised over such a long time. Anyway, that's it. I'd been meaning to post an update for a while, but I've been playing a lot of Ark Survival Ascended and filming and editing multiple videos in Pyro and with the new ships all at the same time. So it took me a bit to focus properly. Like and subscribe if this helped clear things up for you about CitizenCon, and as usual, my name's Dead Leader, and I'll see you out there in the verse. Space. It's cold and it's lonely. But you don't need to be with Dead Leader merchandise.
Merchandising.
With Dead Leader merch, you can represent Star Citizen without looking like a dog.
Merchandising.
Everyone will think it's for some sick band, and if they ask what Dead Leader is, you can just say, you probably wouldn't know him. And they'll think you're sick.
Merchandising.
So grab your Dead Leader merch today and support your favorite content creator. Me, Dead Leader.
Merchandising.
Thank you to my patrons whose support helps me make these videos. If you'd like to join, please click the link on screen to join my wall of legends.